Warning: viewer discretion is advised. Hi friends, welcome to Meals to Unalive For, where we talk about a true crime case, and I make a death row meal from scratch. I'm your host Jody Breton, and if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. Before we get started, this case involves a very young child, so if you guys need to skip this episode, I completely understand. Please do what's best for your own mental health. So with that, you guys have been warned. Today we're talking about a man named Christopher Thomas Johnson. Christopher was born December 26, 1972, and he mainly grew up in North Carolina. Christopher had 4 half-sisters and was primarily raised by his mother, as he didn't have much contact with his father. They never were married, and he was never very present in Christopher's life. It seems like he did not have an easy childhood. Christopher reported that from the age of 7 to 12, he was molested by an uncle, which seemed to cause a lot of behavioral issues. He had several stays in psychiatric hospitals and was on a lot of medication for behavioral issues. By the age of 12, Christopher was using alcohol as a coping mechanism, and by age 16, he had moved out of his mother's home. He had dropped out of school, so he did not get his high school diploma but did receive his GED at a later date. When Christopher did move out, he was on a downward spiral. In addition to being an alcoholic already, he started using heavier drugs, marijuana, prescription drugs, methamphetamines, really anything that he could get his hands on. In June of 2003, Christopher would meet his future wife, Dana Johnson, in Tucson, Arizona. Both of them were homeless and moved in together, moving to Pensacola. That November of 2003, Dana would fall pregnant, and as a result, they moved around, finally settling down to Atmore. Christopher obtained a job with the Swift Supply Company in June of 2004, where he would often work 6 days a week to make ends meet. Christopher reported that the relationship between him and his wife was volatile, and as a result, resentment grew. Dana would give birth to their son, Elias Ocean Johnson, on August 22, 2004. In February of 2005, the Johnsons lived in an apartment at 103 Horner Street in Atmore, Alabama. On February 19, 2005, Susan Mims and Jason Mims, along with their infant Sophie, arrived at the Johnsons' duplex around 8:30 p.m. to play board games. While playing games, the Johnsons and Mims drank alcoholic beverages. At approximately 1 a.m., the Mims left the duplex to go home. Shortly thereafter, at 1:30 a.m., Dana went to bed, leaving Elias in Johnson's care. Not long after Dana went to bed, Elias became hungry, so Dana got back up to help feed him. After warming a bottle for Johnson to feed Elias, Dana went back to bed, leaving Elias in Johnson's care once again. At around 9 a.m., Dana woke up and found Johnson and Elias on the couch in the duplex. Dana stated that Elias had bruises on him and he appeared to be deceased. At that point, Dana ran over to feel Elias. Dana testified that Elias felt cool, so she tried to check his pulse. However, she couldn't find one. Dana grabbed the telephone and called 911. When paramedics arrived at the duplex, Johnson was holding Elias. They observed that Elias was very pale, limp, and his extremities were cool to the touch. Based on his appearance, they carried him to the ambulance and the paramedics checked his vital signs. At this point, Elias wasn't breathing and had no heartbeat. They performed CPR on Elias and rushed him to the emergency room. When arriving, they carried Elias into the emergency room, still performing CPR, put him on a trauma bed, and turned him over to Dr. Stephen Michael Sharp. Dr. Sharp testified that Elias appeared to be dead when he arrived at the hospital. He described several injuries he observed on Elias's body. specifically noticing the bruises on Elias's face, a bruise on the bridge of Elias's nose, ruptured blood vessels around Elias's eyes and chin. Dr. Sharp also noticed a bite mark on one of Elias's arms. Although Elias appeared to be dead, the hospital staff attempted to resuscitate him. Because Elias was unresponsive, Dr. Sharp cleared his airway and placed an endotracheal tube in his throat so that medical personnel could breathe for the child. While attempting to place the endotracheal tube, Dr. Sharp noticed blood in Elias's mouth. Dr. Sharp also testified that Elias had blood in his stomach. After all attempts to resuscitate Elias failed, he was pronounced dead. Police officers Chuck Brooks and Jason Dean with the Atmore Police Department went to the Atmore Hospital to investigate the circumstances of Elias's death. The police officers asked both Johnson and Dana to come to the police station to give statements relating to the death of their child. Dana rode to the police station with a member of her church, and Johnson rode to the police station with Officer Dean. During the ride to the police station, Johnson spontaneously stated that he had something to do with Elias's death. After being informed and waiving his Miranda rights, Johnson indicated that Elias had been crying, so Johnson laid on top of him to quiet the child. When Elias didn't stop crying, Johnson stuck his fingers in the child's mouth and hit him. Johnson stated that last night was the hardest that he had ever hit Elias, and he was pretty sure that Elias's death was his fault. Johnson also stated that after the event that night, he did not think that he had seriously injured Elias. At this point, I just want to point out that Elias was only 6 months old at this point, so of course he's going to cry. He was a literal infant who needed love and attention, and he didn't get it from his father, just neglect and abuse. My daughter is just over a year old, and I can't imagine not comforting her when she cries or hurting her in that way. Honestly, just the thought of it makes my chest tight. Dr. Kathleen Antisse, the medical examiner who performed the autopsy on Elias, testified that it would be reasonable to estimate that Elias had suffered 85 separate injuries, including a bite mark on his arm. Dr. Antisse testified that Elias had multiple bruises on his face and head. She stated that both of his ears were bruised and swollen, which was consistent with a boxing blow and squeezing. Elias's lower lip was swollen and bloody from blunt force trauma. She explained that Elias had 3 impact injuries to his forehead. She told the jury that Elias's ethmoid bone, which is in the sinuses, was broken, and that Elias's sinuses were full of blood. Elias had deep contusions on his head, and that his brain had hemorrhaged as a result of blunt force trauma. He also had hemorrhages in both his eyes and had injuries to his inner lips and nose that indicated that he had been smothered by forceful covering or sealing off his mouth and nose. According to the doctor, his injuries had been inflicted within 24 hours of his death. Dr. Antisse finally testified that in her opinion, Elias died as a result of blunt force trauma and smothering. Christopher's trial began on December 4th, 2006, where he invoked his right to also represent himself. Christopher would plead guilty. In addition to the state's evidence, Christopher testified that he intentionally murdered his son because he hated his wife. He explained that he would have left his wife long before the murder if it had not been for Elias. According to him, he didn't want to worry about his wife's threats of putting him in jail for alimony or child support, so he intentionally inflicted wounds on Elias that caused Elias to pass away. Christopher stated that his final words to Elias were, "You go see Jesus." It took a jury less than 30 minutes to decide that Christopher Johnson was indeed guilty. He then received the death penalty and did not appeal the conviction. Right before Christopher was executed, Dana made the statement, "Thursday I will be granted closure finally. Although I normally do not agree with capital punishment, I will not lose any sleep over this particular execution. Whether it is right or wrong, I feel that a weight will be lifted from my soul on Thursday, and finally I will feel relief. My son was the most delightful, calm little boy I have ever known. Christopher Johnson took him from me. I have spent years trying to heal from this unimaginable pain. I am scarred by this, and Christopher took my son away, my trust in other people, and even my desire to have another child. I still have a hard time being around children because of the sorrow it makes me feel. Every day I see children that are Elias's age, and I wonder what he would have been like. Christopher Thomas Johnson was pronounced dead by lethal injection at 6:25 p.m. on October 20th, 2011. Christopher didn't have a special meal, however, he did pick some prison food from the cafeteria, which was a turkey bologna sandwich with tomatoes and cheese, French fries, and an orange drink. Christopher's very last words would be "game over" before he passed. For this last meal, I would rate it a 3 out of 10. I just don't think that there's really anything special about it, and personally, I would never choose like a bologna sandwich for my last meal, and there was really no like dessert or anything really noteworthy, so it wasn't all that great. This case was definitely a heavy one. I just feel like any cases involving children are super tough to talk about because they're so innocent, and I had seen a couple photos of Elias and he's just adorable. I just can't understand how anyone could hurt a child, let alone his parents. So my heart goes out to Dana, and I really hope that she found peace and happiness as much as she can after this horrific tragedy. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If so, please like and subscribe. That's how we get bigger and grow, and I can continue to put out more content. And I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.